Are you a parent navigating the complexities of co-parenting, family court, or even domestic violence? If you are looking for ways to help protect your children and build a strong and supportive community around you, then look no further. Gray Minds Think Alike is your go-to resource for everything related to the complexities of family life. Join us as we dive into thoughtful conversations with experts and explore practical tips and strategies for tackling the challenges of parenthood in the throes of adversity so that no parent feels alone and every child's safety is protected. Hi, everyone. Happy Friday. I'm your host, Ali Kessler, and joining me today is attorney Heather Quick, the founder and CEO of Florida Women's Law Group, which is the only divorce and family law firm for women in Jacksonville, Florida. Welcome, Heather, to Gray Minds Think Alike, and I thank you so much for chatting today. I spoke with Heather about a year and a half ago when Greyson's Law first came out, and we chatted a little bit about the law and what it could do for victims and clients. And I'm just curious, since we last spoke, have you seen it come up at all?
We have, and really quite a bit more than, well, I guess it's not really surprising, but yes. So I've got 6 attorneys. So, we have quite a few cases, and we've seen it in several matters where the courts have applied the law, and it varies in what they've done. In some, it is to really order ultimate decision making, also sole parental responsibility, and also we've had a couple cases where then it impacted, they specifically applied it to the time sharing schedule and whether it would be supervised or not, and in making it very narrow. And we had not seen that before.
I've heard from a few different attorneys or clients around Florida that they were able to cite it and it saved their child's life. I've also heard mixed things that the judge didn't know what it was and didn't apply it and didn't use it. And so ultimately, I think the training for it will be most vital here in Florida.
Absolutely. And it's really important for the lawyers to do so. I mean, honestly, and yes, the judges should as well, but we as lawyers are in the prime position to educate them through memorandums of law and explain how what was enacted last year does apply to these facts. And that's what a couple of my attorneys did in the cases, and it makes a big difference.
Well, I'm so glad to hear that because I completely agree. I feel that, attorneys should definitely be well-versed in all of the new statutes that come out every year so they can actually, do the best they can for their clients. So I'm glad to hear all of that. Now, you have a 4 women's law group. I'm just curious, why do you feel that it's so important to cater to women specifically?
Well, I have always, felt this way. We've been representing women only for about 10 years now. And it was because women go through a divorce differently. They have different issues, different perspectives. And that's great, right? We're supposed to be different. And I found that we had a real opportunity to help women in a different way because we actually listen to them, and we very often really hear things that male attorneys may not hear because we're women ourselves. We hear when we're like, that sounds like a dangerous situation. That sounds not normal. You need to leave. And also to hear their side of things and really advocate for them when they really sometimes are unable to advocate for themselves. They don't feel strong enough, and that women can be heard at the end of the day.
Well, I love that. I mean, I'm always, thinking of ways to empower women and just to know that they actually can talk to a female lawyer open and honestly and not have to worry about being judged or, just the feedback that a woman could give is strong. So I love that. And I hope that more law firms around Florida and the country, possibly follow suit. So over your career, what are a few like pressing concerns that you've witnessed firsthand in some of your cases?
The biggest concerns that I have addressed and seen are always have to do with imbalance in that relationship. And it's an imbalance of power. I know we don't think of marriages and romantic relationships as, who's got the power, but there is, and it's usually starts with financial and then can grow from there. And sometimes even people enter the relationship and they are somewhat equal financially, but there are certainly men out there that create a situation where a woman feels trapped in a relationship and that she doesn't have options. And so that's always been a big concern for me, because I feel like as a woman, you do bring a lot to a relationship, whether it's financial or not. And usually those are the cases where we see it. And that women just become so susceptible to this feeling of, I'm not worthy, I haven't done anything, he makes all the money, none of it's mine, what do I do? And also being stuck. I hate the idea of any woman feeling stuck in a relationship and that they can't get free, because I believe that that's just wrong. And so obviously, ideally start before you're in a relationship, empowering young girls and young women to, all this education, all this work you've done for your career, please don't give that up. Please don't give up your independence. Even if you are a mother, you can still have that independence, and that gives you the freedom and actually should make for a better relationship. But it does
100%. I always said that when I had Greyson, I was still a person. Like, I was still me, and I still had dreams and hobbies and things that I like. And those are very important things not to give up. And that feeling that many women that I talk to have of that hopelessness and helplessness is one of the saddest, because it's like they want to do something, but they are so scared of the ramifications of leaving, or if they don't have money or nowhere to go. What do you tell your clients or prospective clients when they come to you regarding divorce or paternity time sharing and they exhibit signs of some sort of domestic violence or coercive control?
Well, we do have, obviously, we educate them on the injunction and, what we do have available in the law. Nothing's perfect, but it does exist. So we will talk through that. Very often, I have found in my experience that the women aren't coming in asking that question about the injunction, but it's through the conversation that we recognize this may be an injunction situation. Let's talk about it and explain what that is. So that's the first step, because that provides some protection. And then you can ideally, if the two of you are sharing a home, right, then that provides you some of that protection in making him leave. And then we're going to also really inquire with them as to what is their support system. Because as I know and any of your listeners who've ever been involved in that type of situation, very often you end up being very isolated from your family and friends if someone has been successful in really, keeping you isolated and without that much family support or friends. But that's going to be really important if you have been, kept out of the finances and really don't have that support. We're going to help you really lean back into that if you can, because you're going to need it, and you're probably going to need it to get started financially with an attorney. And for any women who don't, it's like, well, obviously the safety is the number one thing, but we can't certainly make anybody do anything. But we can educate them and help them understand what's available. And then to begin thinking, okay, well, where are your support systems and how can you maybe create some? We do definitely have domestic violence, shelters, but also they have a lot of counseling. They do have support. I know it's not ideal, but it's a wonderful place to start to begin maybe getting that counseling that can help you rebuild some of that self-esteem, understand maybe where you can have some control over your life.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer in therapy to begin with. And I know, there are so many, even just on Facebook or social media, support groups and chat rooms that women can join and speak to other women about similar situations and get advice. So I think the support aspect is 1000% so important. I know I couldn't be where I am today if I didn't have the support of my family and friends. But what if a client comes to you and they don't have enough for an injunction? How do you know what will escalate and what won't?
I wish I did. I don't. But sometimes, and I do believe that our firm is maybe definitely different in this and better at it. Like you can hear, right? Like on paper, sometimes it may not sound enough, but it's like, you really do need to see, but tell me more, because there's always more to it that you can elicit out of an individual to really feel it. I mean, and that's, we teach that in the firm, and it's something that there are certain things you hear that have been said by their significant other that definitely make me very concerned. And it may not be years and years or lots of text messages, but it certainly exists. And it is important when we draft the injunction, which often we do. Now, of course, it's available to anyone to go to the courthouse to the injunction, and they assist you, and they're good at that, right? But it's really important that the right information is conveyed, because the judge at initial look, as you know, is going to read this, and it's very important that what is written is able to exhibit and relay the picture of what is happening and what is truly going on. And that's difficult, but it's important. And so we do that for our clients very often when we are able to, put enough down on the paper, and it obviously got to be accurate. I'm not suggesting that it wouldn't be, or that we would ever try to exaggerate or stretch anything at all. But it's a story. It's a true story, but it needs to read so that the judge can read that and say, that sounds dangerous. I'm going to grant this temporarily in order to allow everybody to come to a hearing. And of course, not every temporary injunction ends up being a full injunction, but it is so key that you're able to transfer that information, the true facts of what has occurred, to the court. And that's where, we as lawyers, we know how to present something to a court that fully shows that you are truly in fear of your life or for your child based on actions that have happened. And so that sometimes we really have to elicit enough, because sometimes it's not, because the judges read that. And I do believe that the courts are getting better. I do, over, the 24 years I've been practicing. I do see that, but you have to be able to effectively communicate that in writing, and that can be difficult, because as somebody going through this, they don't know. It is. There's rarely physical evidence. There's, especially if it's verbal, and there's not always the voicemails or the text messages or anybody else around. That's what makes it so insidious, is because it's just, but if you're in fear. And so that's part of what we try to get communicated, at least on a temporary basis, because if you don't get it granted on a temporary basis, then you still can have a hearing. And it does depend on, obviously, some judges are, unfortunately, shouldn't be on the bench in areas of domestic violence, but that's for another day.
Well, I know, like in my situation, everything was denied. I don't think that it should have been, because they didn't see the imminent danger. I was living it. I saw it for 4 years, but they didn't see that as dangerous situation. But I think what really needs to be learned and taught is sometimes personality disorders can escalate into danger. And I think a lot of judges don't think about that, sadly.
Sadly they don't. And they have an obligation They are there to serve the public. And unfortunately, some are not, and some have a lot of bias that prevents them. And I can't speak for even all of Florida, and certainly not listeners in other parts of the country, but there are some circuits the judges rotate through. And so they have their week of injunction duty where they're getting all the emergencies and then they hold the hearing. And I think there's a lot of benefit to that, I will say, because they aren't burnt out from it and they're not getting jaded and creating all these bias. And then in some jurisdictions, there's just one judge appointed. And I feel like in those cases, too many things get missed.
Of course. Because of you have too many chefs in the kitchen, as they say.
And they hear too much. And unfortunately, in being in the court system, and there is a lot that does not meet the standard.
Do you think that judges should be trained specifically in coercive control or emotional or verbal type of domestic abuse?
I do. I think that they should. I think there should be a lot more training on various personality disorders, and especially like those covert narcissists and things like that disproportionately affect women as, the one on the receiving end of this abuse. And there's not enough training, and I don't think in the judiciary for that kind of thing that does, like I said, specifically disproportionately affect women, and they end up as the victim of violence, women and children, not men. Right. We don't really read that in the paper that often, that the woman has killed the man, right? It may be a similar situation as yours, and we have that a lot, but it's due to their hand, and it's also a child that we end up losing. In the courts, if they had been more in tune, could have done something to stop it. Or at least they could have done something. We don't know, but there's, like I said in the beginning, the laws that we have are the laws that we have. And if they work, it can certainly serve, hopefully, to protect. That is the idea.
Yeah. So I've been in contact with so many different parents who are going through some sort of battle in family court. Aside from instances like mine, I have spoken to women who have dealt with sexual abuse or physical abuse, and they still somehow end up losing their children, or they get sent to reunification camps, or, it's like if they tell or if they share their abuse, that they get blamed, or they get blamed for parental alienation. Do you find that to be true?
So what I find to be true is that women who have suffered through the physical abuse and verbal and emotional, for a period of time, usually over time, they tend to self-medicate. All right, because you must cope somehow. Right. And then that sometimes puts you in a position where you're not the greatest witness. And you may not be the most reliable. It doesn't mean you haven't suffered, but there's a lot more than just a lawyer that you need at that point to get through the entire process. And again, because then others' bias comes in, judges' bias and comes in, and then you are and you're clearly not being properly represented, but I will tell you, many of those women make it very difficult on their attorneys to fully represent them.
And what other type of people should they have in their corner that you said?
They definitely need therapists, but therapists who really understand, and also who have experience in trauma and in the trauma relationships, because I've been fortunate this year. I've had a lot of interviews and guests on my podcast. I've learned so much about the differences with that. and absolutely with a therapist who understands that this person is going through PTSD. The therapy has got to be the right therapist who understands and can really help you move through this. And because you're not going to get over it, you've got to go through it, and it's going to be difficult, and help you understand how you're going to do that.
Right. Why do you think judges don't believe the women who are abused if they actually have proof, or if they've gone to the hospital, they've gone to the doctor, they have physical cuts and bruises, they have DNA, yet they're still not believed?
That I don't know. I don't know if it wasn't presented effectively, properly in court, if it was presented. And then where's the psychological part? Because you must have you really do need the experts in the court system to assist and maybe what you've gone through and your children, because, and especially, you mentioned the alienation. Very often it's the children witnessing this abuse, and they don't want to be with their father. They do not want to be with that person. They know what's going on, but they're also scared and they don't know what to do. And often when you have been abused as a woman, you don't really probably have the strength and ability to shield your children at some point, right? You just get worn down, so anyway, the children see it for what it is. And, the courts, as like, oh, you have the obligation to encourage this relationship and to foster that with the other parent. They're going to be warned. They don't have that ability anymore.
Right. Why is it that, they always want the two parents to sort of work it out, they say? Sometimes you just can't work it out. Sometimes you cannot co-parent effectively when someone is irrational and not making it easy. What can someone do when the other parent is not co-parenting effectively?
That is a real challenge. That is a huge challenge for the women in it. And in the court battles that usually ensue, and I do say battle because, of course, then that partner, that spouse, the other parent, he now uses the court system as a form, really, of continued abuse. And you have to have an expert to explain and to really educate the courts that this father can't do it. These two people cannot, in a healthy way, do this together. So we have to come up with other ways. You can't require this kind of communication. And very difficult for judges to see that and believe it. It is very difficult. And also, does your lawyer believe you? Because I will tell you that will be a problem. And then when we do, we have to effectively present that evidence. And unfortunately, the judges are like, get over it, right? You had a child with this person, get over it and figure it out. Or go to now, sometimes a parenting coordinator can be very, and it can give you a buffer from the communication. You come up with ways that can insulate the parent. And then I have not seen this effectively used in Florida, but I know it's a little bit more popular out west, and that is the parallel parenting. And that can work. There is a lot of research on it, and that
can you explain that for us?
And it tends to work in, when I'm just going to use the 50-50 because so when the child is with you, you parent the way you want, which really people do parent the way they want.
Sure.
And you follow, whatever schedule you want to follow and things. And then when the child is with the other parent, they do that as well. But they don't have to consult one another on, I'm going to take them to the doctor. I want to take them to this person. Like, you can do what you want on your time and you can take them to the doctor as long as there's nothing harmful going on. And that tends to work really well. I do see it can get really, another way I've seen men control the mothers is in the medical care and in that option. Like, where now you have to do all these things. It's like, you can call the doctor and you are welcome to communicate and get the exact same information. And the fathers force the mother to be this conduit. Like just, they're always dragging them in. They always want to pull them in to a communication. And so that's where the parallel parenting in theory is supposed to help. I have not seen it in practice work. I do understand the theory. And I think that
I feel like it could be difficult for the child to sort of adapt to mommy's home, daddy's home, and then maybe have a favorite because daddy lets me watch TV till midnight and mommy makes me do chores. So I feel like
and homework. And it's difficult. It is difficult. And that does happen even in all kind of time sharing relationships.
Of course.
When there's high conflict, because in those, that's a percentage of them, not all, but you know it when you're in it, because it's like, it just seems like nothing seems to work. And I find that especially, if they have some type of personality, disorder, that the men are able to really make the women look like the ones that have a problem with it.
Right. Of course, they manipulate it.
They're very manipulative with the whole thing. And so it's a challenge. It is. And I don't have an answer. I don't have an easy answer.
I don't think any of us do. Do you think that if someone is going through a divorce and there's children, that 50-50 is always the best course of action?
Oh, absolutely not. I fully disagree with that is where you start. But they didn't ask me, right, when they enacted the law. I was against that for many years. It finally made its way through. I think that there are certainly cases where it works. And those are the cases that I don't really see as often. And even some, they're like, yeah, we both are in a day-to-day type situation. This is going to work. There are families it works for. But many families, they don't, because it does require a higher level of communication. And depending on the age of the children, which that's the difficulty, because the younger they are, there have to be more what we call, transfers, more exchanges, and more opportunity for conflict. And the children know this. I don't care if they're in the car and they don't hear it. They know it. They feel it. They're well aware. To act as if it doesn't affect them is ridiculous. And it's not really always in their best interest. It is more in their best interest to have the steady routine and maybe Monday through Thursday, right, every other week, and then add a little bit extra to the weekend. But I think that it has to be what's in the best interest of the children. And you need to look at what that is. And I am extremely biased, right? I'm a mom, I'm a woman. I mean, the majority of women, unless they actually do have psychological problems, they are natural caregivers, and they should be. And, many years ago, even before I began practicing, or very shortly thereafter, they took away the, tender years doctrine that like when you're, when you have the baby that should be with the mother. I mean, that's just, that's not asinine. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that on here, but it is. It doesn't follow with any of the psychology or in any of the studies.
I came from a divorced home, and, I went to live with my mom, and I saw my dad, weekends. And when I got older, it was, if I wanted to hang out with my friends, I sometimes didn't see him, and my dad was okay with it because he wanted me to be happy, and it wasn't court ordered. I don't know why they stopped doing that. I think I want to say fathers started touting that they want more rights and that they should get more rights. But I firmly believe that DNA doesn't give you more rights. In something like my situation, Greyson's father wasn't involved in my pregnancy. He wasn't there for the birth. He was living in a different state. He wasn't even on the birth certificate. He wanted nothing to do with us. And 6 months after Greyson was born, sure enough, I got a paternity suit stating he wants 50% custody because he can, and he got it. And at the time, the 50-50 law wasn't around. This was, 8 years ago now. And yet the judge still gave it to him because he was asking to exercise his rights as a man. Even though it wasn't in Greyson's best interest, he was going to a stranger. I feel like even then, they didn't really look at the child's best interest. They just sort of gave in.
Yeah, the man can show up and be like, hey, I want to be the dad. And I think there's still this perception like, oh my gosh, what a great guy. Like you
Right.
want this. And I don't want to discount, like there are certain
Of
people
course.
that are in that.
No, of course. But those people would have been at the birth and would have been on the birth certificate and would have exercised their rights from day one.
And they would have, right? Like how can you honestly look at the court and say, I hate the mother, but I love my child? Like that's just that doesn't make sense. You don't have to be in love, but you should have a level of respect and love for the person who just created this child, who just created this child and who, made this possible. So that's a huge disconnect that I do think now the courts have to look at, right? They do now. You've made that possible.
Yeah. I know Greyson's dad literally said, his lawyer said, he moved down to rescue his son, which is obviously now even more ridiculous, knowing our fate. But that's what they said.
Mm-hmm. And that was his line, and that was the story. And I think that the courts are more apt to believe that women are crazy and that we're overprotective and all the negative things about us rather than all the positive things.
I think what can we do to change that?
I think we just have to keep educating and showing them this is where you were wrong. Look at what you did and you were wrong. Will this cause you now to listen a little bit better next time? And the lawyers need to be educated as well and that's, I think, harder. Like, I do think that I will hear things from a client that many other attorneys might not, that I will inquire more. I'm going to ask a little bit more about that because I want to know, is this a potentially dangerous situation? At the very least, to put them on notice and let's think about that. I do. I think there's still a long way to go, and we have to be diligent. It's really hard to stand up for yourself when you're in that position. It's really hard. I do find when women feel like, okay, and we fool ourselves, right? That's a coping mechanism to be like, the kids don't know, it's just me. It's like, no, they do. They're gonna be that person. They're either gonna be the perpetrator or the victim the longer you let them stay in that situation. And so it's just education there and the willingness to really just help support these women in these situations and to help them see I can. It may be difficult, it may be really difficult for you to get out of that situation, but it's most likely going to be worth it. Right. And to look at, well, where are my resources and support systems to help me do this effectively?
Now, switching gears to, let's say, just divorce without children involved. What do you see some of the current trends that are making it difficult for women to get divorced, aside from the leaving factor and finding somewhere to live and stuff? Could it be the prenup? Could it be alimony? What are some things?
Definitely, if you've signed a prenup and you're concerned that, that may keep you from moving forward. And that's just going to depend. That's going to be very specific as to, can this prenup be upheld or not? We've successfully upheld prenups. We have certainly gotten them dismissed and, thrown out before, because that's very fact specific. And certainly alimony finances tend to be the biggest thing. And sure. I recognize that, right? It's true. And you are going to get what you pay for in an attorney. And some women don't like to hear that, right? And then they think, well, then now you're not really for me. No, I mean, women should be paid equally as much as men. So I'm not sure where it's a disconnect, but they have to be willing to at least find somebody to fight for them. They might not feel strong enough in themselves. And is alimony going to be on the table? I don't know. It'll depend, right, on the facts, circumstances. And, if, like, let's just say there's a woman listening right now who feels so hopeless and I don't have the funds and the but you can change that. And if you can believe, you can change it, right? You might need to physically be removed from the situation you're in. I'm not going to pretend that there and you can't you're in a situation where you are feel very trapped, but there are options. And if you can just begin to believe there are options, and then you'll start to see them. You may not know what they are, right? And find those support groups. And just like you said, even on social media, like that's pretty much accessible to all of us.
Right.
And just to begin to start getting some support in that, believing that there is a better option for you is really the first step. Because I've had so many women that they don't believe that, and they do come to us. And then if you believe that I believe, you can get out, and that we can make it better. That's the first step. Like that is really a huge step, because it's scary to feel trapped and as if you have no option.
And why do you think sometimes the other party doesn't grant the divorce, or they won't sign it, or they make it very difficult? And I hear stories about divorce lasting like years, and I'm like, what is going on here? What is going on?
A lot of different things can be going on. But the first one is, okay, do you have an attorney that is going to move it through the process?
Okay.
Because it is very, if they're on their own, and there are many women who are afraid to pursue the case, and they're like, well, I just want to make it amicable.
Sure.
He'll sign it. No, he won't. I mean, well, until he signs it, well, I believe it. So how long are you going to wait? Are you going to let it sit in court, or are you going to hire an attorney who has the experience and ability to move it forward? Because, I mean, you're welcome to hear. Yes, it may take you 6 months to get a hearing, but that's better than the years if you're not moving it forward. That is the purpose of going to court. And sometimes I think women are like, well, I'm terrified, I can't go to court. Well, I mean, then you will sit around and not get anything done. You have to be willing to at least entrust in the attorney that you have to get it in front of a judge, to get closure and completion.
Well, I find all of that very fascinating. I wish there's so much more that everyone can do to help all these parents that reach out to me specifically, that they're in difficult situations and I just don't have answers. Is there anything else that you'd like to just tell our listeners, that if they're going through something, hard, and some of them can't afford to hire an attorney and are doing things pro se? Do you have any tips for those people?
I absolutely do. And one, definitely educate yourself as much as possible through resources. True. Everyone has access at some level to the internet, and there are a lot of resources. We have a ton of resources on our website, Florida Women's Law Group, and then also my podcast is really substantive legal tips, advice, education, right? It's not specific advice because, without your facts, but the more you can learn, certainly the better off you will be. And then also, depending on where you are, there are certainly legal aid areas that will take on divorce cases. And even through some of the domestic violence shelters, they get grants, and so then they can employ people. Because, they want to do it, but they've got to get the money from somewhere to be able to pay the lawyers to represent you. And so those do exist, and it's not as abundant as it could be. However, look for those, and there's more out there. It does take some work to find them, but they are out there, and they can, help you.
Well, what is the name of your podcast so everyone can look it up?
Our podcast is called Women Winning Divorce, and we are on all the podcast mediums. And like I said, this year, we've had a lot of amazing therapists and psychologists and different lawyers in different areas dealing with a lot of these things. And I really encourage you. You'll learn a lot. And then there's a lot of resources on there. Like, hey, maybe I should reach out to this professional to help me with this. So, and they're all over the country. And a lot of the therapists. Yeah, you were on there.
You could listen to my podcast with Heather Quick.
Yes, you can. And there's a lot of resources there as well. And then also on our website too.
And your website is
www.floridawomensLawGroup.com. And we also
I'm going to put that in the show notes.
Yes, and we're also on social media at it's the number 4 women law.
And you serve North Florida?
Northeast Florida, yes.
Northeast Florida. Okay.
We go about as south as Flagler County and up to Nassau and Clay County. So
never even heard of those counties.
Well, and we're all nestled here up in the corner of the state. So, but we also work really hard to develop referral partners across the state and across the country. I'm in several lawyer networks across the country. So if I know somebody, we will send you that name and number.
That's great.
So we encourage people to reach out, and if we can help you, we absolutely will.
Well, I love that. I mean, everyone should help each other to do their part. Well, that's all I have for today. I really appreciate you talking with me and our listeners. There's probably so much more we could talk about, but I know that this type of law, family law, is probably the most challenging for attorneys because it's sometimes really sad and it's sometimes very difficult. So I thank you for your diligence and the education that you do continue to take to learn more to help your clients. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. It was just a pleasure to be on here. I appreciate you asking, and anything I can do to help, please let me know. Thank you.
Will do. Okay, thank you. Bye. If there's someone that you want to hear from on this podcast, please feel free to send me an email. Or if you would like to be a guest, please reach out at Ali@graysonschoice.org.